My IT startup recently closed a $50 million deal today. I'm Ashley, 27. Round of investment. 10 years ago, I was on our doorstep with a backpack and $237 to my name. In a month, you'll be begging again. My mother smirked as she glanced down at me. My father didn't even speak, simply slammed the door in my face. I never went back, but this morning, I got 15 missed calls from them on my phone. They haven't talked in 10 years, but now they really want to. Should I answer? Where are you watching from right now? Drop a remark below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I went from homeless youngster to CEO as my parents went from cutting me off to begging for my attention. I grew up in what seemed like a picture-perfect middle-class home in a quiet Boston suburb. Our house wasn't luxurious, yet it was well-maintained with a groomed lawn that my father, Harold, fretted over every weekend. My mother, Diane, was the sort who volunteered for every PTA committee just to keep tabs on the neighborhood chatter. From the outside, we were the model American family. But behind our freshly painted front door, life was dominated by harsh expectations and conditional love. My parents hailed from conservative families and believed success had only one definition: prestigious. College, practical career, early marriage, and 2.5 kids. Deviation from this route wasn't merely discouraged. It was considered as personal betrayal. My brother Jason was 3 years older than me and automatically fell in line with my parents' perspective. He was the star quarterback on his high school team, dated the right kind of females from good homes and never questioned my parents' authority. He maintained a nice B+ average, not so high that he'd be regarded overly bookish, but good enough for the business program at my father's alma mater. Jason was awarded with a new automobile on his 16th birthday, freedom to come and go as he wanted, and a continual flood of accolades. I, on the other hand, was wired differently from the start. Where Jason was athletic, I was cerebral. While he thrived in social situations, I found my passion in problem-solving and creative thinking. By age 12, I'd taken disassembled and reassembled our home computer twice, each time helping it run more efficiently. Instead of thanking me, my mother reprimanded me for breaking expensive stuff, and my father called it messing around when you should be studying useful subjects. When I was 14, my computer science teacher Ms. Reynolds observed my talent and urged me to join the coding club. For the first time, I felt truly noticed. I blossomed in that environment, easily exceeding even the senior students. When Ms. Reynolds advised I pursue a future in software engineering, I made the mistake of voicing my excitement at dinner. Technology is no career for a young lady, my mother said dismissively. Those companies are packed. Many odd individuals who won't take you seriously. My father added, computer programmers are glorified typists. If you want to work with computers, acquire a business degree like Jason and supervise the people who perform that sort of work. That conversation marked the beginning of open turmoil in our home. I started staying late at school to utilize the computer lab, saying my parents I was studying when they insisted on learning my scores in critical courses like English and biology. I maintained all A's solely to keep them from inhibiting my genuine love. By 15, I'd secured a weekend job at the local library. My folks approved because it felt properly dignified, never realizing I spent most of my shifts in the reference section teaching myself Python and JavaScript from technical books. I opened a second bank account with the help of Ms. Reynolds, who became my unofficial mentor and started saving every money. My mother's approach to parenting relied mainly on emotional manipulation. When upset, she'd withhold affection entirely. I just don't understand how I raised a daughter who cares so little for her family's sentiments, she'd say, when I stated thoughts that varied from hers. She mastered the art of the backhanded compliment. You'd be so pretty if you'd just put forth some effort instead of staring at screens all day. My father was less aggressively cruel, but equally destructive in his passivity. He rarely contradicted my mother and utilized his status as breadwinner to minimize emotional connection. "Don't hurt your mother," was his customary reaction to any dispute. When matters heated, he'd disappear to his study, emerging only to deliver punishments my mother had decided upon. As my junior year of high school continued, the strain in our house got unpleasant. I realized a natural ability for developing attractive code solutions, and some of my minor initiatives had gained regional attention. I kept these successes secret from my parents, knowing they'd be disregarded or disallowed. Instead of partaking in the debutante events my mother had arranged, I applied for competitive coding seminars and produced a portfolio of work. I maintained this parallel existence by becoming increasingly autonomous. I took extra classes to finish early, arranged my own transportation through a network of friends, and spent as much at home as possible. By 17, I had almost $3,000 saved, a collection of recommendation letters from teachers, and a developing reputation in local tech circles. What I didn't have was my parents' support or understanding. And as I was soon to realize, I didn't have their unconditional love either. The impetus for my departure from home came in the shape of an email that arrived on a warm spring day during my junior year. I'd been selected for TechStart, a prominent summer program in San Francisco for bright young developers. The 8-week intensive includes mentorship from industry leaders and the opportunity to design a real-world application with a team of peers. Even more astonishing, I'd been offered a full scholarship that covered the program costs, housing, and even a stipend for costs. I read the acceptance email in the school library, palms quivering with enthusiasm. For the first time, my future appeared within grasp. Not the future my parents had prescribed, but one I'd chosen. Miss Reynolds hugged me as I told her, tears in her eyes. "You're going to change the world someday, Ashley," she said. I knew telling my parents would be difficult, but I also felt that the scholarship's prominence may eventually make them acknowledge the legitimacy of my love. I planned my approach carefully, printed out information about TechArt grads who had gone on to successful careers and the firms that recruited from the program. That evening, I waited until supper was finished. When my father was generally in his most receptive state. "I have some great news," I began, placing the packet next his coffee cup. "I've been picked for a competitive summer program in San Francisco. It's entirely supported and it could open doors to scholarship chances for college." The stillness that followed was deafening. My mother placed down her dessert fork with great slowness. San Francisco College. My father went through the papers without really reading them. "What about the internship at Uncle Rob's accounting firm we discussed?" "You never suggested applying for something like this," my mother said, her voice taking on the dangerously serene tone I'd learned to hate. "Because I knew you wouldn't approve," I answered, honestly. "But this is a fantastic opportunity. Less than 5% of applicants get accepted." 5% of computer obsessives, my mother corrected. Hardly an achievement to make life decisions on. The conversation worsened swiftly from there. When they learned I was serious about accepting the opportunity, my mother demanded to know how I would pay for such a foolish escapade. When I informed it was a complete scholarship, she got dubious. "Where would they acquire your banking information for this stipend?" she inquired. And that's when everything collapsed. I was compelled to admit I had a secret bank account they knew nothing about. My father's face clouded with wrath as I told about my savings from the library job. "You've been lying to us for years," he muttered, his voice rising, "going behind our backs, making plans without our knowledge or approval. Because you never listen." I shot back. "You've never once asked what I want or what I'm good at. You just decided my life for me." My mother stood up, her chair sliding against the floor. "Hand over your bank details. Now, if you're living under our roof, we manage your finances until you're 18. That was the moment I knew I had to make a choice. Submit to their control and give up my aspirations. Or maintain my stance. And face the consequences. "No," I responded simply, "that's my money that I earned. You can't have it." My mother's face twisted with rage. "As long as you're our dependent, whatever you have belongs to us. Your father works hard to provide for our family and this is how you treat us?" With dishonesty and contempt. "I've never asked Dad for a dime toward my coding I've used my own money, my own time. Time you should have spent. Concentrate on proper activities, my mother remarked. I realized that library job was a mistake. All those hours unsupervised. My father banged his hand on the table. That's enough, Ashley. You have a decision to make right now. Either you forget this idiotic computer camp, turn over your savings for us to handle responsibly and recommit to the road we've mapped out for you, or you can leave this place. I believed he was bluffing. Dad, please just look at what this program offers. It may set me up for scholarships to prestigious institutions. We've previously discussed your college aspirations. My mother intervened. Riverside State has a good business program close to home, and your father's connections can win you a place despite your unorthodox inclinations. I don't want to study business. I want to make software that matters enough. My father, standing now too. You're 17. You don't know what you desire. Your mother and I have decades of expertise. We know what leads to a solid, respected life. A life that would make me miserable. My mother's eyes narrowed. Such dramatics. This is why girls shouldn't be encouraged in technological subjects. Too emotive for logical thinking. Something in me snapped at that moment. All the years of having my abilities disregarded, my dreams belittled, and my identity stifled boiled over. I'm going to San Francisco, I stated firmly. I've already accepted the offer. I leave in 3 weeks. What ensued was the most heated argument we'd ever had. My mother called me ungrateful, rebellious, is destined for failure. My father threatened to cut me off altogether if I defied them while I remained steady. My mother delivered the ultimatum that would change everything. If you walk out that door to your computer fantasy camp, don't bother coming back. We won't support someone who so obviously rejects our principles. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my rushing heart. I'll pack tonight. I think even then they didn't believe I would truly depart. They were so accustomed to my eventual capitulation that my real disobedience was inexplicable to them. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I heard my mother say to my father, "She'll calm down by morning. This ridiculousness has gone far enough." But I didn't calm down. Instead, I spent the night packing whatever I could fit into my backpack and a little duffel bag. Clothes, my laptop, vital documents. I'd had the foresight to secure over the years: birth certificate, social security card, school documents. I transferred most of my savings to a new account my parents couldn't access, leaving just enough in the original to avoid overdraft fees. When I got downstairs the next morning with my bags, my folks were waiting in the living room. The disbelief on their expressions swiftly gave way to frigid anger. "So this is your choice?" my father asked, his voice hard. "It is," I responded, attempting to keep my voice calm. My mother's face contorted into a nasty smile. "You'll be back begging in a month when you discover how the real world works. Don't expect a warm greeting when that comes." My father didn't even speak. He simply strolled to the front door, opened it, and beckoned for me to leave. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my mother's final words. No daughter of mine would pick computers over family. Then the door slammed behind me with such force that the welcoming wreath tumbled to the ground. Through the ornate glass window, I could see my mother's smirking face, so convinced of my inevitable failure. I gathered up my things and walked away from the only home I'd ever known. Afraid, but somehow more alive than I'd felt in years. The first night of being homeless hit me with brutal clarity. As the adrenaline of confrontation wore off, I rested on a bench in the town park watching the sunset, the truth of my situation sinking in. I had roughly $237 in cash, my savings in a bank account, a backpack of clothes, and nowhere to sleep. The practical obstacles were immediate and overwhelming. Where would I shower? Where might I safely store my laptop when I wasn't using it? How would I receive mail? Questions I'd never considered suddenly become crucial. Survivability concerns. I contacted my dearest friend, Emma, the only person I trusted completely. Her parents were divorced, and her mother, Karen, had always been kind to me. After describing my position through tears, Emma spoke briefly with her mom. Then gave me the news that would save me from sleeping outdoors. I could remain on their pull-out couch for 2 weeks while I sorted out next steps. Karen's apartment was small, a 2-bedroom unit she'd moved into following her divorce. Emma shared the second bedroom with her younger sister, leaving only the living room couch for me. Still, it was refuge, and Karen's only stipulations were that I continue attending school and help with home tasks. 2 weeks, she replied firmly but compassionately, I understand you're in a difficult situation, Ashley, but I'm barely making ends meet myself. You'll need to find something more permanent. Those 2 weeks were a crash course in grown-up responsibility. During the day, I maintained immaculate attendance at school, not wanting to give my parents any ammunition if they reported me as a runaway. Afternoons and evenings, I worked my regular shifts at the library and picked up additional hours stocking shelves at a local grocery shop. Finding stable residence as a minor proved virtually impossible. No landlord would rent to me without a parent's signature, and even the cheapest rooms were beyond what I could afford while paying for the summer program in college. Eventually, through Karen's network, I connected with an elderly woman named Ruth who needed help with home responsibilities and computer support. In exchange for cleaning, preparing 3 dinners a week, and teaching her to use email and social media, Ruth offered me her full basement with a separate entrance. It wasn't perfect. The space was musty with only a camping shower and little fridge, but it was private and safe. I set up my modest living room with a futon mattress from a thrift store and a folding table for my laptop. The deal with Ruth alleviated my housing crisis, but added considerable duties to my already busy schedule between 2 jobs, school, and my responsibilities to Ruth. I averaged 5 hours of sleep per night. My grades decreased significantly as tiredness took its toll, but I maintained enough academic standing to keep my scholarship prospects alive. The physical toll was matched only by the emotional one. Despite putting on a brave face in school, I wept myself to sleep several nights. The wound of my parents' rejection is deep and agonizing. 3 weeks after leaving home, I received a text message from my brother Jason. Parents are worried but won't confess it. Dad says door is open if you're ready to be reasonable. After days of deliberation, I agreed to meet my parents at a coffee shop to explore a potential reconciliation. I arrived hopeful, badly wishing to believe they might have reconsidered their viewpoint. That hope was shortly destroyed. What they provided wasn't reconciliation, but capitulation. I could return home if I abandoned the summer program, submitted my savings to their management, and committed to the education and professional route they'd selected. She didn't even try to hide her joy when presenting these terms. See, just as I expected, she murmured with that usual sneer. Though I assumed it would take a whole month before reality hit in. I'm not here to beg, I clarified, my voice louder than I felt. I wanted to check if you'd revised your position. Our position? My father scoffed. You're the one that walked out on this family after. You told me to leave if I didn't obey your instructions. My mother's eyes narrowed. We gave you a choice. You chose computers over your family. Now you see the ramifications of that poor decision. I looked at them, gazed at them, and saw something I'd never truly recognized before. They didn't desire what was best for me. They wanted what was most comfortable for them. My compliance was more important than my enjoyment or fulfillment. I'm doing good, I responded, grabbing my stuff. I have housing. I'm still in school. And I'm still heading to San Francisco this summer. With what money? My father challenged. Those low-wage jobs won't cover living expenses and save for college. I rose up abruptly, feeling taller than my 5 feet 4 inches in frame. I figured it out, and I'll keep figuring it out. Without your support. As I walked out from that coffee shop, my mother yelled after me. Pride comes before a fall, Ashley. You'll be back when you fail. Her words triggered something in me. Not only anger, yet tremendous determination. I would not fail. I could not fail. I would succeed. Not despite their lack of support, but to prove they were wrong about what they believed they understood about Me. The months that followed were tough, but productive. I secured a renowned scholarship that will cover 75% of tuition at numerous renowned computer science programs. I maintained my arrangements with Ruth, who had become something of a surrogate grandma, truly delighted by her increased ability to video chat with her grandchildren owing to my lessons. The Text summer program exceeded even my highest expectations. For 8 weeks, I resided in a dormitory with 20 other young programmers, all driven by genuine passion for technology. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language and valued my ability. Our team developed a smartphone application that helped link homeless adolescents utilizing local resources, a project inspired by my own personal experiences. When the program completed, I had 3 important achievements: a robust portfolio of work, a network of industry contacts, and most significantly, the unshakable confidence that I was on the correct road. One of our mentors, amazed by my coding talents and work mentality, even offered me a part-time remote employment I could retain while attending college. As I boarded the aircraft back to Boston, I focused on my mother's forecast that I'd be back begging within a month. Almost 6 months had gone, and not only had I survived, I was beginning to thrive. The voyage ahead would still be challenging, but I'd proven to myself that I had the strength to travel it alone if necessary. My admission to Westfield University's computer science program came with a painful reality. For the first time in my life, I had no one to share my achievement with. No proud parents to take pics on Movie Day. No family dinner to mark this milestone. Instead, I put my few items into Ruth's old suitcase and caught a bus to university alone. What I hadn't expected was the deep relief that swept over me as I entered my dormitory. After months of turbulence, I finally had a legitimate place to belong. My room was tiny with institutional furniture and cinder block walls, but it signified something precious: stability. For the next 4 years, I would have secured lodging, access to dining halls, and most significantly, the opportunity to pursue my passion without apology or excuse. My roommate Zoe was a mechanical engineering major from Seattle with brilliant blue hair and a lively laugh. On our first night, after I introduced my truncated family predicament, she exclaimed, "Well, you've got a new family now, one that actually makes sense." True to her word, Zoe became my first college friend and introduced me to a network of STEM students who approached life with inquiry rather than judgment. For the first time, my technological aptitude was regarded a benefit rather than an oddity. In study groups and coding labs, my contributions were valued, my insights acknowledged. The confidence this gave me stretched beyond academics, helping me build a social identity unrestrained by my parents' restrictive expectations. During my first semester, I encountered Professor Sarah Wilson, who had become the mentor I badly needed, a pioneering woman in computer science who had battled her own share of gender bias in the area. She recognized something in me during a classroom talk about algorithmic efficiency. "You don't merely memorize solutions," she informed me after class, "you comprehend the core principles and think 3 steps ahead." That's exceptional even among outstanding students. Under her guidance, I began working on research projects that challenged me to broaden my talents beyond application development into broader theoretical aspects of computer science. She prompted me to submit papers to undergraduate conferences and introduced me to her corporate contacts. More significantly, she listened when I doubted myself, delivering the kind of loving but honest critique my parents had never provided. Imposter syndrome is essentially a must for women in tech, she informed me during one particularly difficult phase. The key is to acknowledge the feeling without letting it dictate your actions. The financial realities of independence proved to be tough. Despite my scholarship, I still needed to cover living expenditures and the remaining portion of tuition. I worked 20 hours weekly at the university's IT help desk, while continuing my remote position with the computer company from San Francisco. Sleep remained a premium, although, unlike my post-eviction scurry, this busy schedule had purpose and direction. Holidays posed their own emotional obstacles. As school emptied for Thanksgiving and Christmas breaks, I encountered the stark truth of having nowhere to go. The first Thanksgiving, I stayed in the practically abandoned dormitory, eating a microwave turkey meal alone in the common room. The event was so sad that I promised never to repeat it. For succeeding holidays, I devised new rituals. Zoe asked me to her family's house for Christmas during our sophomore year. The following year, I organized a weird Thanksgiving for overseas students and others who couldn't travel home. By senior year, these gatherings had become sought after. Invitations with Professor Wilson even attending our unusual celebration. Through these encounters, I eventually formed what Zoe had appropriately dubbed my chosen family, a network of friends, mentors, and colleagues who backed me not out of obligation, but true connection. Unlike the conditional acceptance I'd grown up with, these connections were based on mutual respect and common beliefs. The summer before my senior year signified another turning point. I earned an internship with Horizon Technologies, a mid-sized corporation noted for its creative approach to cloud solutions. My project entailed constructing a more efficient way for analyzing massive data sets, something that aligned perfectly with my research objectives. By the end of the summer, my work had gained the attention of Horizon's senior team. During my exit interview, the CTO offered me a full-time career following graduation with a starting salary that made me momentarily forget how to breathe. When I recovered enough to thank him, he shook his head. "Don't thank me. This isn't charity or favoritism. Your work speaks for itself. We'd be fools not to scoop you up before our competitors do." Returning to university for my final year felt triumphant. I had acquired a prestigious career, maintained great academic standing despite my work demands, and created meaningful relationships. The frightened 17-year-old, who had stood on her parents' porch with nowhere to go, appeared like a different person entirely. Graduation day arrived with lovely spring weather. As I donned my cap and gown, I let myself a minute of reflection. My journey through college had been unconventional and often difficult, but I had not only survived, I had excelled. When my name was called and I approached the stage to get my graduation, the cheers from Zoe, Professor Wilson, and my other pals drowned out the absence of family applause. Later, at a small party dinner, Professor Wilson offered me a card carrying a quote from Maya Angelou. "You may endure several defeats, yet you must not be defeated." Below it, she had written, "Ashley, remember that your worth was never contingent on their recognition of it. I can't wait to watch what you build next." That night, alone, in my dorm room for the last time, I allowed myself to cry, not from grief, but from a complex mixture of pride, appreciation, and lingering regret for the parental support I would never have. The next morning, I packed my possessions, now substantially more than what I'd arrived with, and prepared to start the next chapter of my existence. No longer a student surviving against the odds, but a professional walking boldly toward her future. My first day at Horizon Technologies set the tone for my early career. I came an hour early, dressed in a blazer and pants I'd splurged on with my signing bonus. My immediate manager, Frank, welcomed me with a stack of technical documentation and the login credentials for my first large project. "We don't believe in easing folks in with hectic tasks," he explained. "You impressed us during your internship. Now, show us what you can do with real responsibility." The learning curve was vertical. I typically spent 12-hour days acquiring as much knowledge as feasible while proving my usefulness to the team. My place, a little studio I could now afford on my own, saw little of me beyond late-night collapses into bed and early morning baths. Despite the hard workload, I felt energized by the difficulties and validation of working in an environment where my skills were not merely accepted but valued. 6 months into my work, I found a substantial inefficiency in how our software handled client data encryption. Rather of merely reporting the matter, I spent several weekends developing a potential solution. When I presented it to the senior development team, the room fell silent. This would decrease processing time by nearly 60%. The main architect finally said, reviewing my code, "Why didn't any of us see this?" Fresh eyes, Frank advised. But I knew it was more than that. My approach came from understanding the situation holistically rather than via the segmented perspective that often develops among established teams. My encryption answer provided the trigger for a swift professional ascension. Within 18 months at Horizon, I was promoted twice, eventually running my own development team while being substantially younger than most of my colleagues. The financial security that came with these achievements allowed me to finally confront the mental damage from my family estrangement. I began seeing Dr. Levine, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our monthly sessions helped me see how my parents' controlling behavior had shaped my views and relationships. I recognized trends of perfectionism, trouble accepting help, and a continuous anxiety that any failure would validate my parents' projections about my life choices. You've proven your competence beyond any reasonable doubt, Dr. Levine pointed out during one session. The question now is, who do you want to be outside your work? What does Ashley want from life when she's not coding? This question initiated an important era of personal discovery. I joined a rock climbing gym, discovering a physical challenge that requires the same problem-solving talents as programming, but in an entirely different setting. I enrolled in a creative writing class, giving myself permission to be a beginner at something without the strain of greatness. I even adopted a cat named Algorithm, Ollie, for short. My first experience being responsible for another living creature. As I created a more balanced existence, I also began to notice constraints in my work at Horizon. The company's focus was transitioning toward enterprise solutions that, while profitable, didn't align with my interest in producing technology with larger social influence. During a business hackathon, I designed a prototype for a platform that would allow small NGOs harness data analytics capabilities, usually only available to enterprises with considerable IT budgets. The excellent reception to this side project sowed a seed that grew over the coming months. I began documenting a company concept during evenings and weekends, picturing a company that would democratize access to strong data tools. By my 24th birthday, I had a detailed business strategy and enough savings to maintain myself for 6 months while following this vision. Leaving Horizon was challenging but important. Frank tried to encourage me to stay with promises of greater progress, but I had reached a point where I needed to develop something genuinely mine. I'm not surprised, he admitted when I submitted my resignation. You've always seemed like someone with founder potential. Just remember us when you're shopping for partnerships. The early days of founding my company, Data Bridge, were reminiscent of my initial months after leaving home. Long hours, uncertain consequences, and many moments of doubt. The technological issues I could handle, but the commercial aspects, incorporation, funding, marketing, represented whole new area. 3 months into this venture, while presenting at a local tech meetup, I met Michael Sanderson, a business development professional who had helped several firms traverse their early stages. Unlike the finance executives I'd seen at networking events, Michael asked serious questions about the social impact aims underlying my technical specs. You're not just building another SaaS product, he noticed after my presentation. You're addressing a genuine market gap with considerable consequences for the charity sector, but your pitch requires work if you want investors to see that vision. Our coffee meeting the following week turned into a 3-hour strategy discussion. Michael's experience matched my technical expertise perfectly, and his excitement for database mission matched my own. When he proposed joining as a co-founder handling the business operations while I focuses on product development, the decision felt easy despite my normal caution regarding collaborations. With Michael's connections and commercial expertise, we acquired our first round of seed funding within 2 months. The financing allowed us to employ 2 additional developers and relocate operations from my apartment to a modest office space. Our first important client, a coalition of environmental groups, signed on shortly thereafter, giving important validation of our proposal. The following year went in a whirlwind of development sprints, client meetings, and tremendous growth. By our first anniversary, DataBridge had expanded to a workforce of 12 and was approaching profitability, a rare success for a company At that stage, industry publications began to take notice, with Tech Week ranking us one of their startups to watch and identifying me as an emerging leader in social impact technology. As our company grew, so did my public profile. I was invited to speak at conferences, participate in panel discussions, and even offer guest lectures at my own mater. Each public appearance meant overcoming my innate uneasiness of visibility, but I saw the value of representation in an industry currently dominated by men. After a very successful presentation at a big tech conference, a journalist questioned about my background and inspirations. The question caught me off guard. I had gotten adept at presenting my technological achievements and company ideas, but rarely spoke publicly about my personal journey. I was self-taught from an early age. I answered attentively, and fortunate to have mentors who identified potential in me when others didn't. The piece that followed depicted me as highly guarded about her background, yet interested about establishing pathways for individuals from non-traditional backgrounds. Reading those lines, I knew I had constructed a narrative that honored my experience without revealing its terrible aspects. On my 26th birthday, I achieved a personal milestone that has significant symbolic importance: purchasing my first home. The 3-bedroom townhouse was tiny by successful founder standards, but symbolized security I had once thought unthinkable. As I signed the closing forms, I remembered the horror of having nowhere to live at 17 and felt a thrill of pride so deep it brought tears to my eyes. That nightfall, alone in my new house, I opened a bottle of champagne and offered a silent toast to my younger self, the child who had stood on her parents' porch with nothing but a backpack and desire. She could never have anticipated the life I now lived, the firm I had developed, or the confidence I had achieved. External achievements aside, perhaps my biggest triumph was proving that my parents' vision of my future had been drastically incorrect. The irony wasn't lost on me that as Daytab Bridge continued to receive notice and investment, my own tale remained virtually untold. I had developed a life and profession that would impress even the most rigorous parents. Yet, the two persons who should have been proudest had no knowledge about my accomplishments. In moments of honesty with myself, I understood that their absence still left a wound that success alone couldn't heal. Little did I know that the stillness between us was going to end in a way I never expected. The first contact occurred on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was examining quarterly predictions with Michael when my aide interrupted with an urgent message. Someone claiming to be my mother had contacted the office 3 times, stating it was a family emergency. I excused myself, heart thumping as I returned the phone from my private office. "Ashley, is that truly you?" My mother's voice sounded odd, strained, and somewhat smaller than I remembered. "Yes, it's me," I answered, astonished by my own composure. "What's the emergency?" There was a halt before she answered. "Your father had a heart attack 3 days ago. He's stable now, but it was serious. Triple bypass surgery." The news hit me with surprising vigor. Despite everything, the thought of my father's mortality shook me. "I'm sad to hear that. Is he? Will he recover?" "The physicians are optimistic, but it's been challenging." Her voice cracked slightly. "Things haven't been nice for us, Ashley. Not for a long time." I waited, unwilling to make this easier for her. After 10 years of silence, she would need to do more than hint at issues. "Your father's firm failed 2 years ago," she continued when I didn't respond. "The economic collapse, terrible investments, we lost the house. We've been living in an apartment, and now with these medical bills," she trailed off. "I see," I said, still absorbing this revelation. "And you're calling me now because we're your parents," she said, a trace of the old wrath coming into her tone. Despite everything, family is family. The meeting ended awkwardly with my vow to think about things and her agreement to text me my father's hospital information. As soon as we disconnected, I sat in startled silence, trying to unravel my emotions. That evening, I called out to Emma, who had remained in our hometown and occasionally heard local rumors regarding my family. Her information confirmed and expanded on my mother's statements. My Father's construction business had really failed with rumors of mismanagement and rising debt. My brother Jason had gone to Arizona years ago and rarely visited. My parents had been forced to sell their house and most of their valuables. I heard they've been inquiring about you, Emma added. Someone spotted your photo in a business magazine at the dentist's office. Word got around that you'd done well for yourself. The timing of my mother's contact suddenly made more sense. It wasn't just my father's health problem, but the discovery of my achievement that had inspired her to contact out after a decade of silence. Over the next few weeks, my mother's attempts to reach me increased in frequency and desperation. Emails received explaining my father's challenging rehabilitation and their rising financial troubles. Voicemails collected, her tone altering from instructive to progressively begging. The final straw came when she somehow stole my personal cell number and began calling regularly, often multiple times. One evening, my phone displayed 15 missed calls from her number. When I eventually answered, her relief was evident. Ashley, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. I'm aware, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What exactly do you want from me, Mom? The directness of my question seemed to catch her off guard. We want to reconnect, to make amends. Your father's health scare has made us realize what's actually essential. And what is that exactly? Family, she said. Simply. We're still your parents, Ashley. Nothing can change that. I almost chuckled at the irony. You seemed quite explicit about ending that relationship when you kicked me out at 17. We were mistaken, she conceded. The words clearly tough for her. We didn't comprehend your interests, but we've seen how successful you've become. We're proud of what you've accomplished. There it was, the validation of my success. Not my happiness or personal growth, but my quantitative, publicly observable achievements. They were proud now that there was something to gloat about. Now that my life choices have been confirmed by external parameters they understood, money, professional status, recognition. I need time to think about this, I told her, afraid to commit to anything in the heat of the moment. Of course, she consented promptly. But please, don't take too long. Your father asks about you every day. After hanging up, I called Dr. Levine and made an emergency session. Her counsel helped me work through the complicated feelings this interaction had created. Anger, vindication, lingering hurt, and surprising longing. Forgiveness and reconciliation are separate things, she reminded me. You can forgive them for your own tranquility without resuming a relationship that can be hazardous. I also sought guidance from the people who had become my chosen family. Zoe, now an aerospace engineer in Houston, came in for a weekend to assist me absorb the situation. Professor Wilson invited me to supper and listened as I sorted through my conflicted thoughts. Even Ruth, now in her 80s, offered her perspective during our weekly video conversation. People can change, she answered thoughtfully. But not everyone does. Even when they think they have. Trust the data, not the words. After weeks of reflection and innumerable pros and cons lists, I made my decision. I would speak with my folks, hear them out fully, but keep hard boundaries. This would happen on my terms in a neutral location with defined time limits. I chose a quiet restaurant halfway between my home and their apartment, arriving early to select a table that afforded both privacy and fast access to the exit. When they walked in, the sight of them was unsettling. My father, once powerfully threatening, seemed reduced, his shoulders stooped and face-lined. My mother had aged as well, her carefully groomed beauty now showing symptoms of financial hardship. They recognized me and lingered momentarily, maybe equally shocked by the changes a decade had wreaked in me. As they arrived, I rose, but didn't give hugs or effusive greetings. We shook hands like business acquaintances, the formality a protection against hasty familiarity. You look nicely, my mother said, her eyes taking in my tailored blazer and confident posture. Thank you, I replied. How's your recovery going? I directed the question to my father. Better each day, he said, his voice lower than I remembered. The doctors say I'm exceeding expectations. The talk went slowly, touching on surface-level updates on health, work, and general life situations. I shared chosen information about Daytab Bridge without giving personal specifics. They told me about their downsized existence and my father's part-time profession as a consultant since his business collapse. As the main course arrived, my mother finally addressed the elephant in the room. "We owe you an apology, Ashley. The way things ended between us, it wasn't right." My father nodded. "We were too rigid, too convinced we knew what was best." "And what's changed?" I said directly. "Besides discovering out I've become successful in the field you discouraged me from pursuing." My mother's expression stiffened. That familiar guarded look momentarily crossing her face before she controlled it. "We've had time to reconsider many things. Losing the business, our home. It makes you understand status isn't everything. We were mistaken about computers being no vocation for a woman." My father continued, "Obviously, you've proven that. Their apologies appeared genuine, but incomplete, focused more on being incorrect about my professional prospects than about the deeper harm they'd inflicted by removing love and support conditionally." When I pointed this out, my mother attempted to rewrite history. "We never stopped loving you, Ashley. We were trying to protect you from what we felt was a mistake by kicking me out." I challenged. "By warning me I'd be back begging in a month. We didn't imagine you'd truly depart," my father said. "We thought it was a phase, a rebellion. By the time we understood you were serious, pride got in the way of reaching out." "Pride and circumstances," my mother added. "Life became exceedingly difficult for us after the business difficulties started." I took a long breath, calming myself before making the statement I had carefully prepared. "I appreciate you acknowledging some of your faults. That matters to me. But I need you to comprehend something clearly. I'm not the same 17-year-old who stood on your porch. I've established a life, a career, and relationships with folks who value me wholeheartedly." Their reaction suggested they hadn't expected such directness. I continued. "If we're going to have any relationship moving ahead, it will be on new terms. I won't subject myself to manipulation, criticism of my choices or expectations. That I'll supply financial support without healthy boundaries. Of course not," my mother answered hastily. "Too quickly. We just want our daughter back in our lives," my father added, grabbing for my hand across the table. I allowed the brief interaction but retained my determination. "That's feasible, but it will be a gradual process. I'm happy to start with occasional phone calls and see how things develop. But at the first sign that old patterns are resurfacing, I'll step back without hesitation." The disappointment on my mother's face suggested she'd hoped for more immediate reconciliation and perhaps more urgent aid. My father, nonetheless, nodded slowly. "That's fair," he said gently. "More than reasonable considering everything." As the meal completed, I paid the tab despite their weak complaints. "I'll call you next week," I promised, standing to depart. "We can take little steps and see where they lead." Walking to my car afterward, I felt neither the catharsis of perfect reconciliation nor the terrible satisfaction of revenge. Instead, I experienced something more subtle and, eventually, more precious. The quiet assurance of an adult who had set boundaries from a position of power, rather than terror. My parents had once held all the power in our relationship. Now, via circumstances neither of us could have imagined, the dynamic had shifted completely. They needed me far more than I needed them. The epiphany wasn't celebratory, but depressing, holding both responsibility and freedom. That night, I mused on the irony that their forecast had come partially true, but not in the way they intended. Someone was indeed reaching out after all these years, hoping for assistance, but it wasn't me asking to return. Life had humbled them in ways I would never have wished for, despite our tumultuous background. As I prepared for bed, I noticed a text from my mother. "It was lovely to see you. Your father and I are extremely proud of the woman you've become." The message produced a confused whirl of emotions. Part of me, the hurt 17-year-old, wanted to respond with righteous bitterness. You has nothing to do with who I've become. But the person I was now recognized that such a response would only perpetuate old patterns. Instead, I just said, "Thank you for meeting today. I'll call following week as promised." Setting boundaries didn't mean being nasty. It meant defending the life and self I had fought so hard to achieve while staying open to the idea, however remote, that meaningful change could be possible. Even in relationships I had once thought hopelessly damaged. 6 months after our original reunion, I decided to meet my parents at a neutral location that held significance for this next essential step, the coffee shop where they had once expecting me to beg for their acceptance. The synchronicity wasn't lost on any of us as we seated at a corner table, the afternoon sunlight spreading lengthy shadows across the familiar space. Our limited contact during the interim months had been cautiously hopeful. Weekly phone calls had gradually grown in length and depth. I had visited my father during a brief hospitalization for a minor problem, and my mother had sent a lovely card for my birthday, the first acknowledgement in a decade. These little steps had built just enough trust for what needed to happen next, a genuine confrontation of the past I had planned attentively for. This talk, both emotionally with Dr. Levine and practically with clear talking points. As we exchanged first greetings, I noted how obviously my parents had aged. My father's hair had turned entirely white, and my mother's previously perfect look reflected the strain of their reduced circumstances. Part of me felt compassion for these changes, while another part recognized them as the natural results of life's choices, something they had never permitted me to experience when under their roof. "I appreciate you both agreeing to our talk," I began, once we had ordered. "Before we can move forward with any form of relationship, we need to address what happened 10 years ago." Honestly, my father nodded seriously. "We understand. We're ready to listen." My mother felt less comfortable yet mustered a tight smile. "Of course, sweetie." Taking a deep breath, I began the remark I had rehearsed countless times. "When you kicked me out at 17, you did more than just remove me from your house. You verified what I had thought for years, that your love was conditioned on my compliance with your vision for my life. That night and your rejection when I attempted to reconcile weeks later taught me that I couldn't count on the two persons who should have been my strongest supporters." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Ashley, we never ceased loving you. We were trying to lead you toward what we felt was right by threatening homelessness, by smirking and forecasting my downfall." I kept my voice steady despite the emotion surging within me. "That wasn't guidance, Mom. It was control. We were mistaken." My father interjected, startling me with his directness. "I was mistaken. I was so persuaded that my method was the only way to security and respect that I couldn't see the world was changing. Couldn't understand that you have gifts that deserved nurturing, not suppression." The admission looked sincere, his eyes finding mine without defensiveness. My mother, however, was less eager to assume complete responsibility. "You have to comprehend our perspective," she insisted. "We grew up in different periods with different values. And you were so young to make such significant judgments." I was young. I agreed. I needed support and direction, not ultimatums. But that's not what happened. Instead, I had to figure out how to survive while graduating high school, how to secure college money without parental support, how to establish a life from scratch, when the individuals who should have been my safety net were the threat I had to overcome. My unvarnished story of those early months sleeping on Emma's couch, working numerous jobs. The basement arrangement with Ruth plainly distressed my father. He gazed down at his coffee, shoulders sagging, with what appeared to be real remorse. My mother kept her composure, but couldn't quite meet my eyes. "We didn't know," she remarked gently. "We believed you'd gone to stay with friends from that computer club. We convinced ourselves you were all right, that you needed to learn independence the hard way." "Did you ever check?" I questioned. "Did you ever call my school, reach out to my friends, do anything to verify that your 17-year-old daughter wasn't homeless or in danger?" Their silence was answer enough. "I'm not disclosing this to punish you," I continued after a moment. "I'm disclosing it because whatever relationship we form today has to be built on reality, not comfortable modifications of what happened. I survived and ultimately thrived, but it wasn't due of your attitude to parenting. It was despite it. My father reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but making the gesture. You're right, and I am so very sorry, Ashley. Not just for what we did, but for what we missed. Your graduation, your first job, your company's success. All the moments we should have been there to celebrate. The sincerity in his words reached something in me, something I had kept firmly guarded. For the first time, I let myself to address not just my anger at their rejection, but my grief for the parents I had needed and never had. My mother, sensing the shift, attempted to divert the talk onto practical things. We're very proud of what you've accomplished. Your father and I have been reading all we can discover about your company. The way you've helping those nonprofits with their data demands is astounding. I recognized the deflection for what it was, a retreat to safer footing, but also heard the genuine admiration in her voice. This has always been our challenge. Her incapacity to connect emotionally versus my need for true recognition beyond achievements. Thank you, I acknowledged. But my work is only one aspect of who I am. If we're going to have a relationship, I need you to be interested in me as a person, not just as a successful founder you can now proudly boast. The directness of this sentence certainly caught her off guard. After a moment's hesitation, she said, "What do you enjoy outside of work these days?" The question was odd, but represented a little step. As our chat continued, I gave clear bounds for moving forward. I would not provide direct financial support, but could help them discover resources for my father's medical expenditures. I would be open to regular communication, but would pull back promptly if old patterns of criticism or manipulation emerged. Most importantly, I would not pretend the past hadn't happened or that trust could be instantaneously restored. Rebuilding a relationship will take time and sustained effort from all of us, I explained. I'm willing to try if you are, but with the understanding that we're creating something new, not returning to what was. By the time we left the coffee shop, we had reached a tentative comprehension. Not the dramatic reconciliation of weeping hugs and instantly healed scars that movies might represent, but a realistic acceptance of past suffering and cautious hope for a better future. Connection. As I watched them walk to their car, my father moving gingerly with his post-surgery gait, my mother altering her pace to meet his, I felt an unexpected sense of tranquility. The anger that had once propelled my determination to succeed hadn't faded totally, but it no longer defined my relationship with them or myself. Back at my office the next day, Michael noted the shift. Immediately. You appear different, lighter somehow. I faced my parents yesterday, I explained. Really challenged them about everything, and he prompted when I didn't immediately proceed, and it didn't cure everything, but it changed something crucial. I grinned slightly. I realized I don't need their approval anymore. I don't even need their total understanding. What I needed was to speak my truth and set my boundaries. In the months that followed, we established a new kind of relationship. Not the intimate tie other families have, but a respectful connection that respected both our shared past and separate journeys. My father, humbled by health issues and business failure, showed genuine interest in knowing my career and life. My mother tried in her way, though tendencies occasionally arose in comments or expectations I wanted to address immediately. On the first anniversary of our reunion, I offered them to tour Databritt's offices. Their first visit to my professional world. Watching their emotions as employees greeted me with great respect as Michael walked them through our client success stories, I saw the complexity of the moment. Their pride was now genuine, but it was too late to claim credit for the route I had made without them. Later that tonight at dinner in my home, my father lifted his glass in a toast to Ashley, who succeeded not because of our wisdom, but because of her own power and resolve. The acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes, not because I still wanted his confirmation, but because it signified a truth we could finally communicate. Looking back on my path from that fearful 17-year-old to the confident 30-year-old I am now, I recognize that the terrible remarks my Mother uttered on her porch carried an inadvertent gift. "You'll be back begging in a month," she had predicted, never imagining that her words would fuel a determination that would carry me through every future hurdle. The greatest accomplishment wasn't proving her wrong about my career route. It wasn't even developing a profitable company or reaching financial security beyond what they had envisaged for me. The real success was uncovering my own resilience, building true ties based on mutual respect rather than duty, and understanding that family, whether biological or chosen, should support your genuine self, not demand its surrender. Today, my connection with my parents continues to evolve within the boundaries I've established. I've opted to grant them a presence in my life without giving them influence over my sense of value or happiness. This balance symbolizes possibly the most crucial lesson of my journey. That forgiving doesn't necessitate forgetting, that compassion doesn't demand vulnerability, and that the family we build through our choices might be more caring than the one we're born into. What about you? Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about family relationships? Have you suffered with conditional love or had to set boundaries with parents? Share your experiences in the comments down, and if my story resonated with you, please enjoy this video and subscribe to the channel for more honest conversations about conquering life's hardships. Remember that your worth isn't established by others' recognition of it. Sometimes the people who should recognize your value most clearly are the ones least suited to do so. Thank you for listening to my tale, and I wish you strength in writing your English auto-generated